Hello, Widowhood. Welcome to this conversation today with Addison. Addison and I met on TikTok, and I am looking for the male voice in this conversation, and that's why I reached out to him. Let's get into this conversation.
Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today is Addison, and I just randomly connected with Addison on TikTok, and he said yes, and here we are. And let me change that. It isn't random. I literally wanted to have more men to have their voice in this conversation. And when I saw Addison was so willing to share his story, it drew me to him to ask him to have this conversation. So it may have seemed random for probably all the people that reach out to him, but my desire was intentional to be able to have his voice be part of the widowhood. And I am glad that he is here. Welcome, Addison.
Thank you for having me very much.
So, Addison, tell us about you. Tell us about your wife. Share, please.
Okay, well, a little about me. I am 31 years old now. I have been widowed for a year and 4 months, a little bit longer than 4 months. I'm almost at the 5 month mark. I'm kind of right in that weird middle. There's not a specific, but it's been about a year and 4 months. I was technically 29 years old when my wife passed away. She passed a couple months before my birthday and a little bit after her 30th. We were real close together. So I just a normal guy. I work at non-emergency medical transport, which is like wheelchair transportation of people from like doctor's appointments and things like that don't need ambulatory services. They're just they need transport because most cars obviously don't fit wheelchair people. So that's a little bit just about me as a person. Now, as far as about my wife, are you kind of just wanting to know how we
Oh,
met or how
yes,
about
yes. And her name. What is her name?
my wife's name is Brittany.
Brittany.
Brittany Ann is her first and middle name, but I referred to her as Starlight. That was
Oh,
her nickname. Only I knew that nickname until after she passed away, and then I kind of let it out that was her nickname because most of the time people would hear me call her Babe or Honey or Dear or something, just normal pet names. But she got that specific nickname from me the day that we first kissed, and that was kind of like if I used that name, it was a serious moment, not like you're in trouble serious, but hey, this is kind of a real intimate thing, and I need you to be really paying attention to me type thing.
so before we got to Starlight, we had to have met. How did
Yeah.
that come? How did you and Brittany meet?
So our meeting was it had to be a God thing because the church that we met at is off the beaten path. There's no big signs that say, "Hey, come to this church. This is our service times." It is a a building on the back of a lady's property, and the church is called the Glory Barn. So it's literally just off the beaten path. Usually you're invited out there, or you hear about it through like maybe Facebook or something, but there's just no way of getting out there unless you know it's there. And so I've been attending this church for a while, and at this time I was also traveling and speaking as an evangelist. So I would be there for a time and then I would be gone traveling and doing other things, and then I would come back. And interestingly enough, the church only does night services, so it's on Sunday nights only and Wednesday nights. That way everybody else can go to another church Sunday morning, or other things like that. So night service only. And she came in with a friend several months before we actually connected with each other. And to me, at that time, I wasn't looking for a wife or a girlfriend or any of that. I kind of had put the dating game away from me, and I was just focused on, being a minister and doing those other things. And so the very first time I met her, she was face down on the ground having a moment, bawling, just having a church moment. And I didn't think much of it. I just kind of pushed a box of tissue to her, and I moved on. I didn't much care to know her name or anything. She was just another churchgoer. And I left the church for a couple of months to do other engagements. And I came back one night, and she was one of the very first people to greet me. And she came up to me and, she said, "Addison, it's so good to see you." And she hugged me. And in that moment, for whatever reason, when she said my name, everything else stopped. It's like, the whole time stood still type thing, but almost to a literal sense. Like, it's almost like everything else faded away for just a split second. And a light switch flipped inside of my soul. It's like something just instantly changed within me. And I had this overwhelming desire to know who she was. And I didn't have that with anybody else, didn't care about anybody else. When she said my name and she hugged me, it was like something changed. And I did not remember her name, and she knew mine. And so I was like, oh crap, I don't know this lady's name. What is going on? Who are you? Why do you remember me? And I don't know you. And so I am sitting on the front row of this church service, praying in my head the whole time, somebody say her name, because now I want to be smooth with it and be able to say, I remember you, Brittany, but that's not, I couldn't remember her name. And so for the whole church service, I'm sitting there just pleading in my head, somebody say her name. And at the end of the service, the pastor called her out by name. And I was like, score, yes, got a name, Brittany, ha. So I immediately go up to her after service and was like, Brittany, it was so good to see you again, thinking I was being smooth about it. And she looked me dead in the eyes and went, you didn't remember my name, did you? No, I didn't. I was
At least you
didn't,
messed up. At least you were honest.
I didn't deny it. I was caught. I was like, I can't make this any worse than it already is. So I was like, no. And I'm a genuinely honest person as it is. I don't keep skeletons in my closet, so there was no point in lying. And I just, no, I didn't. And she chuckled about it, and we started talking. And apparently, we were both flirting really heavy. And I've never been one of those guys that have been good at relationships. So it's not like I decided, I'm going to start flirting with this girl. And I just did. And my best friend who was with me at the church service at that time was just observing this fiasco from the side. And, this is how unsmooth I am about it, right? She apparently tried to give me her phone number at least 2 or 3 times in this conversation. And I missed it right over the head, had no idea. And I asked her for her Facebook instead, because that's how awesome I am. I was like, can I get your Facebook? And she, for whatever reason, decided yes. Like, I guess I was cute or charming or something. I don't know what it was, but she gave me her Facebook information. And so when I'm leaving this church, my buddy was like, are you going to lay that on any thicker? And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, seriously? I was like, what? He goes, you were flirting so hard that I'm pretty sure the rest of the service, God and everyone, knew that you were flirting with her, except for you. I was like, I was just talking to her. He went, just talking to her. All right, sure. I said, did you get her phone number? I said, no, but she gave me her Facebook. He went, okay.
Facebook is public, so anybody could have looked that up. But
well, you see, I only knew her first name. I only knew Brittany, so I didn't know what her last name was. So it's kind of hard to find that out at the time. So she, gave me her first and last name. And
okay,
I went home that night and found her and added her as a friend. And that's as far as it went for a little bit. I mean, I didn't immediately reach out and start trying to message her and talk to her, but it was a little while later, May 26th.
Oh wow, you remember the date? Okay.
I do. I am not that typical husband that doesn't remember dates and times. I do remember all of the dates that mattered. And so it was May 26th, and the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, had come out in theaters, and I was going to go see it because I was a huge fan of the franchise. And I remembered in this conversation that I had with her that she loved the Pirates of the Caribbean too. So I messaged her on Facebook. I was like, hey, I'm going out to see this movie by myself. If you would like to go, I know that you like Pirates of the Caribbean. We can meet at, whatever time. She sent back, sure, let's do it. So we ended up going to see this movie at night, and it was like one of the later showings. And it wasn't a date. It wasn't like that. It was not my intention. I was not asking her out on a date. I simply did not want to go to this movie alone, and everybody else had turned me down. So I was like, sure, let's ask Brittany if she wants to go. And she had the same kind of intention. We were going to see it as friends from church, and there was no hand holding. I didn't like drift the arm around her or anything in the middle of this date. I went to see this movie, and we sat there and we enjoyed the movie. And after it was over, it ended like around midnight-ish, maybe like 11:45. So it was like a later showing. We both decided we were starving. It's like, okay, this is late, we're starving. And I suggested, well, Buffalo Wild Wings is open until like 2 or 3 in the morning at this time, because this is, pre-pandemic. I don't know what their hours are now. But why don't we go grab some food? And that gives us a chance to just talk and catch up a little bit more. And at this point, it became a date. That's where it just.
I'm gonna say it sounds like a date to me, Addison. I was trying to give you that it was just a movie, but now we're eating wings. Yeah, I'm thinking we're on date. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was when it became a date. And after the date, she even told me that her mother said something very similar to her. She said, "Oh, you're coming in at like 2 in the morning. So how was your movie with a friend?" And she, that kind of was like, it became a date. So yeah, at that point it did, because we started having the first date conversations, getting to know each other, asking the questions, family, goals, likes, dislikes, went through all the whole spiel. These usually go on a first date, except for I like to be dramatic. Apparently, I like to give a little flair, because I don't know how many guys that personally that have gotten away with telling their girlfriend that they love them on the first date and not being red flagged, creepered, kicked out, thought to be pushy, any of that stuff.
Okay, hold on. Did you do the "I love you as a sister in Christ," or how did you package that "I love you" part there, Addison?
So here's how this happened. She starts talking about her past and what she'd been through, and I found out that she was married at one point and had been divorced, within the last couple of years, and just some of the stuff she had grown up with in the home, that she really didn't come from a loving background, as it were. My family, the home that I grew up with, has always been this unconditionally loving, accepting. I didn't lack for anything. I never felt disserviced by my parents or anything like that. And so, she's telling me kind of her back history, and my poor heart is crushed for her of what she'd gone through. And, her first husband had not physically abused her, but like emotionally and verbally abused her, and then went out and cheated on her, and then served her the papers for the divorce. It was kind of like, I guess, I don't know if he just blamed it all on her or what, but he was, and so she's telling me all this, and my heart was broken for her. And so I reached across the table and I just touched the top of her hand with my fingertips. I didn't grab her hand. I just touched her hand, and it got her to stop talking, and she looked at me. And I said, "Don't take this the wrong way, but I love you, and you are worth it, and you are perfect just the way you are, and you are unconditionally loved in this moment right here."
Okay.
And she's staring at me in my eyes, and she just kind of, "Is it weird that I believe you?" And I said, "No, because if you look at my eyes, you can tell I'm not lying to you." And she, that was kind of like, she didn't get flustered. She didn't break away. She didn't run. And in that moment, I wasn't intending for that statement to be like, "Let me get in your pants. Let me take you home. Let me, I'm trying to romance you, baby." I honestly, in that moment, meant that she was entirely loved unconditionally by me, no matter what. From that point and forward on, it didn't matter if we were dating, weren't dating. At least in my eyes, she was who she was and worth it.
There was so much transparency in that first undate date conversation that
Yeah.
you guys had. What were you thinking after you left from that date with her?
That she was amazing, and I didn't understand. Honestly, I didn't understand the draw that I had. I had, it was almost like otherworldly, if you will. There was just something that pulled me to her. And at that point, when I left the date, I had her number at this point. So it was not a Facebook thing anymore. We now had a number, and so I was like, this girl's amazing, and I don't know what it is, but I honestly love her in a way that I don't think that I love other people. And I've always been one of those people that I view others and kind of that same unconditional loving aspect when it came to just meeting people on the street. I have a genuine love for the person that I meet. I don't just treat you nice because you're there. Like, I genuinely hope for the best for your well-being. And I think that's a Christ-like attribute. And I've got that from being a Christian as long as I have. That just kind of is there. And to be honest, it's been hindered quite a bit since she passed away. I've kind of hit that reclusive wall of where my heart died with her. So it's been really hard for me to keep that unconditional love out there for others at the moment. But, we started talking by text at this point, and it was a daily thing. It wasn't like I texted her and she waited 5 hours and we kind of it was kind of like we just started conversing like we are now through text messages all day long. And it was 1 week later, June 2nd, 2017, we went to a revival or like a church event. It was kind of just one of those special services because it was pretty sure it was a Friday. June 2nd, I believe, was a Friday. And this also just happened to be the same date that Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot came out. That was kind of the opening night for that.
That was
And
good.
so,
That was good. That was
right,
good.
I loved that movie. And we went to this church event, and it was like, I don't know, 10 o'clock when it ended. It was kind of started at 8, and so it went on for a couple hours. And then, we were all of us there that were laughing and having a good time. And afterwards, I was like, hey, I'm a night owl. I'm not going to go home. The cinema's right over there. Wonder Woman just came out. You want to go see it? And she was like, yeah, let's go. So we left her car in the parking lot, and I drove her to the movie theater. See, because the first time it was just friend thing, so we drove separately and we met.
You met up there.
Now it's like, hey, you want to go on another date with me? Let's roll to the movies. Went and saw Wonder Woman. Great movie. Loved it. She loved it. I brought her back to this church parking lot, and at this point, it's probably midnight, a little after, another late night. And I will never forget the day, because the church that we were at was kind of, a little off the beaten path again. And it's, there was a field just to, so if we're looking at the parking lot here, there's a field on my left over here, and the moon was bright. I don't know if it was quite full, but it was pretty darn close, and it was to our right. And I parked next to her car, and I was getting ready to leave, and I was standing, I had my car door open, and I was standing in my door like I was getting ready to sit down, and she was on the other side of my car door. This was the second date. Again, I'm not trying to, bust a move, not trying to go home with her or anything. I just, I'm getting ready to leave, and she's standing on the other side of my door. And I looked past her briefly and could see the fireflies in the field, because it's one of those that's out far enough. They're all over, they're twinkling. And she had crystal blue eyes. Like her eyes were just the brightest blue. And because she was facing me, the moon was behind me, and it was reflecting in her eyes, and her eyes looked like starlight. And so while I'm talking to her, she suddenly leaned over the car door and kissed me. Mid-conversation, stopped me in my tracks. And the last thing I remember before accepting the kiss, like before closing my eyes and just letting it happen, were her eyes. And that's how she got her name, Starlight. And so she kissed me at that moment. I looked at her and I said, so we're a thing then, yeah? And she goes, yeah, I think we are. And I left giddy and smiling. She left giddy and smiling. And in fact, that day, June 2nd, is when it's registered on Facebook, even, that we started dating. That was kind of what it, so one date, a week later, we were officially a couple.
Literally. So at this point, like, where are you thinking this is going? Like, in your heart, being a guy, are you thinking this woman will be my wife, or I just kind of like her a lot? What are you thinking?
I am thinking that's my wife, because I will be honest with you, the day that she said my name and the switch flipped, that was kind of my realization that I've met her. That's, I waited my entire life for my wife. I had dated 2 other people before her. I had that very first love, you get, and that was my first date, and that lasted like a month or 2, and we broke up. And then I dated again, I think a year or so after that, and that one lasted maybe 2 months, and that was it. And I had been abstinent at this point. I've never been with anybody. I was still a virgin. I was holding myself. I personally had the belief that God had somebody out there for me who he knew and had planned in advance, and this was my wife. And so I waited. And there was that draw, that desire. It was like at that moment I knew I've met her. This is her. And so when we started dating, everything from that point on was like watching a puzzle fall together. It was a very natural relationship that kind of came out of this. There wasn't a lot of things that went wrong, a lot of stress, a lot of fighting. It almost was like it felt like we had been together our entire lives. Like it was almost like we had known each other from birth. It just fell into place like a puzzle from this point on. So I would honestly say that the day that I knew that she was my wife was the day that she said my name. And
Wow.
that switch flipped in my soul. It's kind of like he was saying that one. And even my pastor, when he talks about how he met his wife, when he knew she was the one, was when he saw her in school one day, and like I think it was high school, and she said it was almost like there was a light that just enveloped her, and he knew, and they were married for I don't know, 50 years I think before she passed away. She actually died about a month or so before Brittany did. And there she was my god. They were my godparents, so they were real close with us anyways. And so I hadn't even gotten over that death before I lost my wife. But that was that moment. I was like, I knew in my soul, even if my brain hadn't caught up yet, and I was like, oh, this is inside. I knew that was her.
That is a lot because, I mean, when we think about getting married to commit ourselves to someone, I can see it being a lot for your brain to catch up. It's like, okay, slow down, dude. We need to make sure, like, all these different things, trying to check these blocks and make sure that this is the right one. How long did you guys date before getting married?
So we started dating on June 2nd, and
And what
we
year? What year was that, Addison?
2017, June 2nd,
Okay.
2017. And we were dating June, July, August. It was probably August or September, right in that time. We There was an issue with her. One of her family members had gotten out of prison, and this time frame is as close as I can remember it. It was before I proposed, but it was pretty close to it. So it had to have been like August, September time. One of her family members had like gotten out of prison and was kind of had a violent tendency towards her stepfather and things like that. Well, they had her mother, stepfather, and her sister had a trip planned. And so they were going out of town, and it would leave Brittany there alone. She had to work and whatnot. And they were talking about it when I was over there one day, and they were concerned about leaving her alone. And I said, I can stay with her for those 2 weeks while you're gone. Not a big deal. I don't mind. If that would make you feel better, I can at least stay and help watch the house and whatnot. And so they agreed to it. And so I effectively sort of moved in for about 2 weeks. She was living at her parents' house. I was still living with my parents. I did not leave my parents' home until I married her. I literally was there. I literally took the Bible verse, "You will leave your father and mother to be joined with your wife," quite literally, apparently, because I was home and with them until that point. But I stayed with her for 2 weeks, and it was probably the easiest thing I've ever done. Like we grocery shopped, we did laundry, we cooked meals. Like it was effortless. Like we didn't have these conflicting like personality traits, or I like this and you don't, and oh, you can cook and can't clean. Like it again was almost like we had just been together already anyways forever. And so in this 2 week moment, and I was respectful. I slept on the couch. But I took care of her. I had, my father loaned me one of his firearms just to keep in the house, and just in case this guy showed up. And they had cameras and stuff too. But nothing ever bad ever happened. And her parents came back, and I went back home. And it was December. It was December. I want to say 17th, December 17th, 2017. I took her to the Myriad Gardens in Oklahoma City, and we we had picked out a ring initially. And this actually is really important. We picked out this ring that she wanted, put a down payment on it, and it was an extravagant ring. It was going to be several grand, and I was cool with that. She was cool with that. And it was probably about a month or so after that. So she knew I was going to propose. Like we'd already talked about it. She just didn't know when. But we had gone, looked at the ring. She picked the one she liked. And about a month after that, I lost my job. And so it was kind of like, this ring is now going to have to go off the table because whatever I get is not going to pay me as much as I was making for sure. And I think the next job I ended up getting was like Jimmy John's, like sandwich delivery. So I was not making the money that I was making before. And that was probably one of the hardest phone calls that I've ever had to make in my life because, it's kind of stipulated in our culture that the guy needs to be able to foot the bill for this expensive ring. Everybody was like, oh, look at my ring. It's so fancy. And so I'm crushed and I'm like having a panic attack. And eventually I just finally get up the courage and I call her and I was like, hey, listen, after losing my job, there is just no way financially we're getting this ring. And I said, would you be opposed to me telling them to take it off hold and then just taking what down payment we had and putting it towards another ring? And she's said, no, that's fine. Like she was okay with that 100%. And I was relieved. And so I ended up going back to Huntington Fine Jeweler, which is where we got our rings from, and told them, okay, this one's not going to fly. I lost my job. Here's my new budget. This is what we're looking for. Just take the down payment off of this one, put it on this next one, and we'll go from there. And it actually ended up, the down payment ended up covering most of the next ring anyway. So I was only, shy a couple $100. And it's the one that I wear around my neck now. She got the ring. And so we went to the Myriad Botanical Gardens. And they had their stuff set up for Christmas time, right? Because we're in Christmas, we're getting there, and downtown Oklahoma City's got decorations, and the Botanical Gardens does some Christmassy stuff. Like they have a big Christmas tree in the middle of their garden that is made out of poinsettias, like potted poinsettias. They make it into this big tree. And I didn't know where I was going to propose. I simply knew that I was going to. And what I trusted was that whenever I see the spot, I will know and I'll just propose. And I did my best the whole time to like keep my hand out of my pocket because I had the box in there. And I don't know if she suspected this was the day or not because, she didn't get super fancy, but she always looked beautiful. So it didn't really matter to me. But we go through this garden and we're just walking around and I stumble across this little waterfall, kind of in a nook, just kind of had to go around this corner a little bit. And it was just there, this little tiny waterfall. And I knew in that moment I saw it, I said, this is it. This is the spot. And so I pulled out my phone to take a picture of the waterfall. And at this point, trying to muster the nerves that I'm getting ready to ask this question. And at the same time, I'm almost 100% sure she's going to say yes anyways. Like I'm not thinking I'm going to get rejected here, but it's still that whole, holy crap, holy crap, holy crap, holy crap. You're about to propose. You're about to ask this woman to be your wife. Wow, holy crap, holy crap. And so I finally got the picture, and she at this point is like, hey babe, and I was like, hey, come here, check this out, look at this waterfall. And so she kind of came around this nook, and I had to back up a little bit so she'd get by me again, small nook. And she looked at the waterfall, and when she did, I pulled out the box, dropped to the knee, and she turned around and I said, Brittany, will you marry me? She didn't hesitate. She said yes, put the ring on her finger. She loved the new ring because she hadn't seen this one. She knew what the other one looked like, but she didn't know what the new one looked like. She was like, yes. And I had told her parents that I was going to propose. I had told people I'm going to propose. She doesn't know, but I'm going to. Because I even, I was traditional. I asked for her father's permission. Well, she had a father and a stepfather. So I asked them both. She didn't care for their opinion either way. But, I said, just for tradition, do you mind? And, whatever. But both of her fathers agreed that that's fine, dude. We don't have a problem with this. And so they had like a whole after proposal, like a little small party thing going on at the house that she didn't know about. And so I proposed, and then we walked around downtown a little bit after that, finished our garden, and then the Devon Tower in Oklahoma City has these massive red Christmas orbs that they put up that are kind of like ornaments that you hang on a tree, just the traditional big, but they're like huge because this is a massive tower. So they put stacked 8 of them on top of each other, and it just makes this big thing. And we go over to it, and her nails that she had put on that day matched the globe. And so we had her take a picture. She put her hand with her ring up against the globe. So it's like sparkling red in the background with her nails that are kind of maroon and sparkly. And then the ring that was glistening, and that was kind of our, one of our announcement photos we sent to Facebook that day because we were, hey, we're engaged now. So this is June to December is how long it took me to propose.
Okay, I have so many questions.
Go for it. Why not?
6 months?
6 months.
How do you know that you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody and do that in 6 months? Was, I mean, more of those confirmations? I mean, I see people wait 3, 5 years. 6 months.
Yeah, I've never agreed with that. I've never agreed with the people that wait 5, 6 years, or even some like one of my cousins was engaged for 10 before
Okay.
so it was like, or together with the person for 10 before they got married. It's like, really, it's taking you 10 years to figure out that, hey, this person is it? Like, are you just holding out, hoping, what if they have a red flag that shows up and you're just gonna, okay, well, it's not for me. And I think the purpose of marriage, in my opinion, when you get married and you vow your life to a person, you are vowing your life to a person to grow with them. You're not going to stay the same. Something is going to change. You're going to have kids. You're going to do life. They're not going to be the same person that you married 15 years ago, anyways. They're going to change year by year. New interests, new hobbies, new stresses, new whatever. And when you vow yourself to a person, you are saying, no matter what happens, I'm with you through it till the end. You change, I change, we change together. We grow, we learn, we adapt. We become a single unit. As the Bible says, we become one creation, one person. And so as we're just dating and everything is so, I think it was because it was so natural. I'd had the 2 dating experiences before, and it was very forced in some areas, and there was a lot of not give and take. It was more take, 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 or give, give, give. And so there was just not but with her, it was a very natural progression. It was kind of what you would say we were meant to be. That's what it felt like. It just kind of felt like you were with that person and meant to be there. And I think I really was solidified in it when we lived together for that 2-week time, because it didn't throw things off. It didn't make it where it was like, oh, I'm really trying to make you like me. And we didn't change. We just lived as we were. And, if you've on my TikTok, if you go under my pinned videos, there actually is a video of her doing a vlog where it was a year after we got married. And she talks about how most of the struggles that people have when they get first married, learning to live with another person, all that, we didn't have those. When she moved in on our wedding night, nothing changed.
Wow.
Not a thing changed in our relationship. It's almost like we just continued as we had been the whole time. So I think honestly, we were probably married in spirit before we were ever physically married, as far as like just how we interacted with each other, loved, cherished, was devoted. And, it just kind of seemed like we were getting a piece of paper at the point that we got married. It was kind of like, I know you're the one. She knew that I was the one. And we went with that. And obviously in a 6-month time period, you can't learn everything about a person in 6 months. You just can't. But in my personal mind, and I would like to say that my wife was of the same accord, obviously, because we got married. It didn't matter what we didn't know was coming, because we were convinced we were going to do it together. And so there really wasn't necessarily any signs that came after that. It was just the fact of how well we fit together. Like it was a puzzle. It was just being put together piece by piece.
That is fair. I want to circle back to the 2 weeks together.
Uh-huh.
We live in a day and time where the idea of you saying no intimacy before marriage. How do you feel like you both were in agreement with that? And did that actually make the relationship better by not focusing on that physical part?
I don't know if it was not focusing on it. I mean, it was at the forefront of both of our minds. I know that I'm a guy. It was at the forefront of my mind. So it's not like it was something where I was just this monk that was walking around peacefully thinking, I won't sleep with her until we're married. There was a constant flux, and especially living together for those 2 weeks. I mean, the opportunity is there. You're 2 people alone in the house. So it's not like the opportunities weren't there. It wasn't like, that we were not both after each other. And I know that in our culture, living together, I mean, even in her family, that was her sister was living with her fiance for 2 years before they ended up breaking up, and they were sleeping together and all that other stuff. And her mother, I think, lived with her stepfather for like 8 or 9 before they got married. And so it was pretty much and her family just accepted that. And I think that ended up eventually causing some contention that we were getting married so quickly, because her family was like, okay, we'll just go live with the guy and figure it out. What if you decide in, a year you're going to break up? So, that was kind of even her family's view is just go live with the guy. It's fine. Just, it doesn't matter. And then for us, because we were Christian, it was like, no, we don't live together before marriage. It's just, we don't do that. And so that 2 week period, I didn't even see that technically as, if I'd have felt like I was moving in to stay, I couldn't have done that. Like, it wouldn't have set well with me. But because I felt like it honestly was just kind of for her protection, this was almost like if I was in a long distance relationship, which I was the second time, I ended up would go and stay for a couple of days and come home. That was kind of the same thing here. I'm going for a week. I still go to work. I still leave. I'm only technically there alone for, about 8 or 9 hours, and then I'm sleeping. And then, so I didn't see it as that. And I, personally don't think that people should live together in a permanent sense prior to marriage. That's just not one of my personal beliefs. And I know culturally that doesn't fly with a lot of people. And people will say, well, how do you know somebody if you don't live with them? And again, that falls back on you're promising your life to them. You're going to learn and grow together. You're going to become a different unit anyways. And what we used to do separately at homes, when you got married, that changed because you couldn't do things separately anymore. And that was a team effort. You naturally just kind of flow and change into a unit anyways. So even if you live together and like, oh, I didn't like that they did this, or I didn't like that she did that, that's going to change. Naturally, it's going to flow and change. Somebody's going to give, somebody's going to take, and eventually you're going to say, oh, I like this. We compromised here. So it was obviously a thing. I mean, we're both, and I was 26 when I got married, and has she turned 27 yet? No, we turned 26. She turned 26. Her birthday was September 11th, and mine was January 17th. So she turned 26, and then I turned 26 in January. We got married in March. So when I proposed in December, we got married in March. That's how long our engagement was. And
that wasn't. No, I'm just laughing, thinking from the first May 29th, before we even got like less than a year, if I'm calculating that correctly.
9 months.
Yeah. Thank you.
9 months, give or take. I mean, like a couple of days. But yeah, no, that's from the, I say that May 26th was the first date we went on, but from the time that we became a couple, like officially a couple, June 2nd to March 3rd, it was about 9 months, give or take. And we, when we proposed, when we got engaged, I didn't have a date. I wasn't planning on March 3rd. I wasn't like, hey, let's get engaged and then turn right around and get married. We were going to take the traditional route with it. We were going to plan it, maybe give it a year, but at the same time, I didn't really want a big wedding. That wasn't a big thing to me. And she had been married prior. So, it's like, if you don't want it again, there's really no reason to have it. I don't need you in a white dress. I don't need you. And so I don't need a massive reception with 500 people. I'm here for you. I can get married in the courthouse tomorrow, and it's not going to change the fact that I'm married to you. That's kind of the whole purpose. I'm married to you. It doesn't matter what we do it as. And so it was February 18th, 2018. We were talking about, well, what do we do? Let's do a date. We're kind of starting let's hone in on a date. That way we kind of have an idea of venue and all this other stuff. Like, how are we going to do it? And so, we kind of talked to my parents a little bit and was like, we're not consulting people on dates. I'm not going to go ask all of her family members, what dates are good for you guys? Do you have any prior plannings? I didn't do it with my family members. We didn't discuss it with anybody. We just were like, okay, we're going to pick a date. And my father gave me some of the best advice I've ever had. And I will give it to any married couple that ever asks me. He said, you pick a day, and those that are supposed to be there and matter will be there. End of story. And we both said, okay. And that was kind of like, you just need to pick the day. And if they're going to be there, they're going to be there. If they're not going to be there, they're not. But again, it's your day. You're getting married. It's for you guys. It's not for us. We want to be there to celebrate it with you. But at the end of the day, it's you getting married. Okay, cool. So we entered into this office that I'm sitting in now. I'm actually at my parents' house today. And because I have dogs that bark, and I was like, I want to get somewhere where I'm not going to have to worry about them barking and interrupting the audio. So I came over here to do this, and we were sitting in this office. I was in this chair, she was in a chair that was over here to my right. And we're just thinking about it. And I was like, let's just pray for a day. And I'll pray about it, you pray about it, and then we'll just say dates and we'll see how close we get. We both got March 3rd.
Wow.
And we're like staring at each other. I was like, you do realize this is like February 18th, right? We're talking a couple of weeks. Like, are you sure? March 3rd. Okay. Well, I guess we got to tell people then. And one of the very first things that you think of, just honestly, if I tell you that I am getting married to somebody in like roughly 2, maybe 3 weeks, and it's very sudden, what is your first thought?
Are you inviting me or you just tell me about it?
I'm asking, I'm inviting you. What is your first thought if somebody comes up and says, they got engaged, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're getting married in 3 weeks?
Oh my gosh, where are we going? What is going on? I'm so excited for you. I'm like, okay, ah, this is like, it's like Disney World sort of kind of thing, the way this has happened so quickly.
So in the Christian community and world, the very first thought is she pregnant?
Oh, okay, okay. I can see that too. But not even Christian world, that's anybody. It's like, are you about to get married because she got knocked up? No, no, no,
Why
that's
would
fair.
you jumping that gun,
No, 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 that's fair either way. I mean, I'm more of a romantic, so I lean towards the mushy mushy. But
So,
yeah, I can see that too. That's fair.
so that was some of the very first questions I got hounded with by family members. Did you get her pregnant? Is she getting ready to have a baby? Is that why you're suddenly getting, that was the announcement of it being so quickly derailed a lot of things. And it
I
went
mean, so
from,
hold on, let's back up a little bit.
uh,
That's it. Backing up to be a little bit just a reality. That is a fair question for people to ask because it does happen so often. So I can see the reality of that, and then maybe having all this time together and different stuff like that. I can't particularly doubt them for asking that question.
right. And I don't blame them either. I wasn't mad at it, but that was just kind of, that's where the question started. And, again, it's a very quick turnaround. And so we've got, we'd already been kind of looking, when we started talking about getting married, we started looking at apartments before, we were engaged. Let's talk about, we hadn't set a date yet, but what kind of apartment we looking at? She had 2 dogs to bring in. So I'm kind of restricted on, I got to have an apartment that accepts pets and they can't be a weight limit on them because they're 2 different sizes. And so there was things we had to start looking at. And so a lot of this we kind of already started looking at prior to me setting the date anyways. So when we set the couple of weeks out date, a lot of things we already knew. A venue, already had it. Our church, they offered it to us for free. My pastor is my godfather. So it's like, hey, he was like, church is yours. So I didn't have to look at a venue. And, we decided no reception. I don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on food and all this other stuff. I'm pretty sure our entire wedding cost us between $300 and $600.
That is
Total.
nice.
And that most of that cost came from like clothing, like her getting a dress, making sure I had, a suit that fit. And, her uncle even gave me the pair of shoes that I use because he'd had them sitting in the closet. They were never used. They were still shiny and new. He was like, here, see if these fit you. Congratulations. You have a pair of dress shoes. Like it was when we announced this thing, the way that it fell together, that almost was no cost to us. My church offered the venue. One of the event planners at our church did it for free, provided all the decorations, the candles, the communion cups we used, just provided it to us. Didn't have to worry about any of that. So what things we bought were some of the small things that she wanted from Amazon, the dresses, and she came down the aisle in a silver dress. So she didn't even go wedding dress shopping. She went dress shopping and went to, like a bargain place. I think she spent $130 on the dress. I mean, it wasn't even a big thing. It was beautiful. Loved the dress. I mean, it did need to be white for me. And
Mm.
so when we decided, hey, let's start telling people, backlash started pretty quickly. Now, a lot of that was, I think some of it was disappointment from families that just couldn't be there because I had obligations and we understood that. We gave everybody the same amount of notice. Nobody got favored. I didn't tell my parents 3 weeks prior to telling her parents. We told everybody pretty much the same day. I mean, or, it was the very next day. And My parents, as soon as we told them, I said, "Hey, we're getting married March 3rd." My mother looked at my dad and said, "We have a trip planned that day," and he goes, "I think so. Let me go check the calendar." Looked at it, they canceled. Said, "We're going to be there. You're getting married." They just pushed everything else aside. Other family members, obligations, couldn't be there. Wasn't a big deal. It did not matter to me. Did to her family, and it caused a real big kind of falling out. To the point that like she got kicked out of her home 2 weeks before we got married. So they kicked her to the curb, was like, no. And so she ended up living with her aunt and uncle for those last 2 weeks while I'm getting an apartment set up. And because again, if we're getting ready to get married, we're not moving in together. She's not coming to the apartment early. None of that stuff is happening. We are sticking to that value, that gun. And a lot of people asked, especially on TikTok, well, why didn't you just let her move in with you? Well, first off, I was still living with my parents. Hadn't even got the apartment finalized, hadn't moved everything out yet. And my parents aren't going to let us live together. They said she can come stay for the night if she needs to, but she is not staying here with you until. So we found her a place with her aunt and uncle. And, we got the apartment. I had the apartment, I think, a week before we got married. So I had it 1 week before we got married. And so I moved from my parents' house into that apartment for that week and nested. She thought it was adorable. She came over a couple of times, brought the dogs to let them see the new place, kind of get them acclimated, and to help do some decorating. But she never stayed the night. She always went home. And she would come in and just giggle at me. She goes, "You're nesting." I was like, "I'm what?" She goes, "You're nesting. This is adorable." And because I had like the couch is set, the lights set, vacuumed, and everything was set. And I kept asking her, "Do you want it here? Do you want it there?" And I was like a little busy hen just running around making sure everything was good and nesting. And when it came time for the wedding, 4 of her family members showed up: her aunt, her uncle, and her grandparents.
And that was the aunt and uncle she was been living with?
Yes. And her
Mm.
grandparents. Everybody else was either on the trip that they were planning, or because of how things went and things got heated, they just didn't come.
Oh,
And that continued into our marriage for like the first 6 months. We got married. She was ostracized from her family. She worked with her mother, so she lost her job almost immediately after the marriage. I was dealing with school, started having trouble there, was dealing with grief. And so like that first, when you talk about somebody having a rocky start, we went from being in this perfect bliss of, hey, we're getting ready to get married. And as soon as we got married, it's like you threw everything that could go wrong at us in one moment.
wow.
And our entire marriage up until about 2 or 3 months before she died was an uphill climb. Like we
Mm.
didn't have a beautiful, peaceful marriage. We had a hell of a marriage. We didn't argue and fight per se, but just the amount of life that happened so quickly. Her losing her job, her dealing with the stuff with her family, then having to try to rebuild that relationship. Then she had a wreck and lost her car. I ended up getting hurt and was put out of work for an entire year because of a knee injury. So she was single income in the home for a whole year. And that was, we were always curious why did she lose the car? But because she lost the car, we got $10,000 in coverage from insurance because it was a newer vehicle. That $10,000 kept us afloat for the year I was off work. I'm not working, I'm not making money. She's single income. That savings account, we just drained it over the year, and that put strain on her. She ended up having to find a new job and ended up making it. It was apartment leasing and managing, and she's love her soul, but she's not a manager. She's not mean enough. She didn't have a mean bone in her body. And, to be a manager, there's times where you have to be stern and firm and stand by policy. And she couldn't do it. She's too kind
Mm.
hearted. She didn't want to have to evict people. She didn't want to have to, they're having a hard time. Policy says no. She wanted to say yes. And so it was constantly tearing at her soul, plus coming home to, a husband that can't work at the moment, but I'm still doing stuff around the house. I'm still cooking and cleaning and all of that. And that was my role. I pretty much was Mr. Mom. Even our whole marriage, I'm the cook, I'm the clean, I'm the laundry guy. She helped out and did some things around the house, but for the most part, that was me. And that's just because I was raised that way. I'm the cook. I had chores, I had responsibilities. And so I just kind of brought that with me into my marriage. I wasn't the typical guy that everybody, talks about when they make fun of it on TikTok. Like, oh, your husband, you take super hot showers, he takes super cold showers, or, he won't pick up here, but you will. And it was honestly kind of reversed.
Hmm.
I loved super hot showers. She did not. I was the one that was cooking and cleaning. She didn't know how to cook. Like it was things like that. She could cook very select few things, but as far as like making meal plans and doing all that, that was me. I did all that. And I think,
What were some of
we
your favorite dishes to make for Brittany? Or she like?
so the one that I would make when it was kind of like I really love you today, like this is the I always made her surf and turf. I would go to the store, buy a New York strip, get some like bay scallops and stuff, and I never told her I was doing any of this because I got home from work before she did. So one of the things that I loved the most was cooking for her and making sure that when she walked in the door, it was hot and ready. And we used an app called Life 360 to track each other, and it wasn't nefarious like I don't trust you. It was, you know, if you're ever in danger, the app lets me know where you're at. Plus, if you're coming home from work, you say, hey babe, I'm on my way, I can use the app and say you're 20 minutes out, I need to put this in the oven, I need to, and we eventually got like my whole family on the app, so all of us could see where everybody is at any given moment. If there's an issue, we can find you. And so I loved to cook for her. That was a passion of mine. I enjoyed cooking. And I think she put on like 30 or 40 pounds after we got married because I was cooking for her. And I didn't believe in this, lean, healthy, green stuff. I'm a Southern guy. So I'm cooking, she's getting biscuits and mac and cheese and gravy and all this, we're cooking. And so, but my favorite meal was surf and turf. And I'd do like a New York strip, bay scallops. I would do asparagus with like garlic mashed potatoes. And I would check this 360 app so that when I saw that she was coming home, I would plate it, set it at the table. So when she opened the door, it was there and ready to go. Like restaurant service, boom, it's there. Glass of wine is full. All she had to do was drop it first, take off her shoes, sit down and eat.
That is a
And,
dream, Addison. That
and
is
that's
a
daily.
dream.
It was every single day. It didn't matter what I was cooking. It was either ready when she walked in the door, or by the time she took off her shoes and changed into something comfy, it was plated and on the table or ready for her to eat wherever we were going to eat that day. And that was a passion of mine. I loved cooking for her to the point that when she died, I don't cook anymore. Very rarely do I actually cook things. I eat out of cans, out of bags, anything that's popped me in the microwave or heat me up in a pot. Or if my family asks me. So like today I'm over here, we're going to do Mexican this afternoon. So I'm doing the grilling of the chicken and the seasoning and stuff like that. But for the most part, by and large, I do not touch the kitchen anymore. I
Did you?
lost that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I lost that passion when she died.
Did you cook much before you dated Brittany? Was it cooking a thing for you?
Yes, I actually taught myself how to cook. When I was younger, I would experiment in the kitchen. And, my mother planned our meals. So we knew exactly what we were having every day of the week. She would give us like, her grocery day was on a Friday or a Saturday. And she would say, okay, groceries are tomorrow. I need 5 options for dinner. Because we would do, 5 dinner days, 1 day of leftover, and 1 day of eating out. That was just how the budget worked. That's how it worked. So, she had a list of things that we had made, and we would say, okay, we're having, let's do these 5 dishes. And then when she got groceries and she would come home, then the idea was all you have to do is say, okay, tomorrow night we're having spaghetti. She would take whatever out. So we knew what 5 we were having. We just didn't know what day we were having the 5. We got to kind of very, very pick and choose. But I knew then what was in the kitchen that was reserved and what was fair game. And so I would start experimenting with like lunch meats and things like that, what seasonings work. And obviously I made some absolutely atrocious dishes when I was younger. But as time went on, I started understanding what spices taste like what mixes together, what does this, what does that. And then I started working in industries like that. One of my very first jobs was working in a senior living home, like a nursing home, in the kitchen area. I was like a wait staff dishwasher, but at the same time got to help the cooks. Had like the real old black lady teaching me how to make collard greens, and the other person teaching me this is how you make a proper, hamburger patty with the right seasoning. So I just kind of absorbed that as time went on. I was even, a manager of a pizzeria at one point. I worked at Payway at one point. So I've got like Payway's recipes memorized. So I can make Chinese food at home from scratch, know how to do it. I know what sauces go where. And all of this I just kind of absorbed before we got married. And so when she married me, She effectively had to cook. And all
Right?
she had to do was say, I want chicken. Okay. Do you have a preference? Hot, spicy, sweet? Let's do sweet. Okay. And that's all she had to say. And I was like, okay, this is what we got. This is what we're having. What sides do you want with it? What do you want? What are you feeling? And that's all. Or she would say, surprise me. And so I would just kind of open the pantry, as she called it, and make a dish. She hated that and loved it at the same time because she didn't understand how I did it. She wanted to cook. She tried. She did dishes, and she never, destroyed a dish per se, except for that one time that she served me sweet spaghetti. That was interesting because she heard that she put a little sugar in the tomato sauce to cut the acidity down.
Ew, ew.
That is an accurate statement, but it is a little sugar. It's a pinch, maybe a little bit more to help cut the acidity down. It is not like a fourth of a cup of sugar or however much she put in there. And so when she served spaghetti and I ate it, it was a little sweet. I didn't say anything. She was like, this just tastes really sweet to me. It's weird. And I was like, I'm a good husband. I ate the food, ate it all. I put the whole thing away. It was fine. But she never understood. She was like, I don't get it. I was like, you don't get what? She goes, how do you just walk in and open the pantry up, glance around for a couple seconds and make this? And I was like, practice. I learned what things went with that. So, I love to make surf and turf. I love to make mac and cheese for her. And I would do like a bacon mac and cheese that we would bake. And I would take like, those goldfish crackers, and they call them the extreme flavoring or whatever, and crush those up in a bag, sprinkle them across the top, bake it. So it'd be like
You had me with bacon. I'm just saying, when you said bacon and mac and cheese, I was like, I don't even know what else. I didn't really hear anything else. I just heard bacon and mac and cheese. Okay.
Right. So, and I'd cook the bacon separately, then mix it into the mac and cheese, and put that in a pan, and then bake that thing. She loved pastas, so I would make like homemade carbonara, and that's not like American carbonara. I use Italian, so I use like the egg yolks and the Parmesan, so not what you would see in like a standard typical American, like Olive Garden carbonara. That's not, I would make the real stuff. So it just depended on whatever it took to make her happy. Didn't matter what it was. It didn't matter if she was craving sushi. I either made sushi fresh at the house, or we went out that night and went for sushi. That was one of her favorite meals. If she was craving Jimmy John's, we had Jimmy John's. It just, and it's whatever she wanted that made her happy. I had this mentality for the longest time that it's not about me. And I oftentimes, to some detriment and to some benefit, put myself on the back burner. It was like, it's not about me. It doesn't, my feelings are valid, but I'm not going to overbear you with my stuff type thing. And so that was the marriage that I lived. I lived to serve my wife. And being married to me was a dream. That was the dream. It wasn't, you talk to a child, or you talk to a college kid or a high school kid, and you say, what are your dreams? And they're going to list off, well, I want to be a banker, or I'm going to be a blue collar guy like my dad, or I'm going to be a billionaire, or I'm going to be a fireman. That's the typical response that you get. I wanted to be a husband. That was my dream. That was it. That is as far as the goals in my life went. It stopped at husband. Because at that point, whatever we decided to do as a family, it was serving her. So if she wanted us to move to Texas and live on a farm, guess I'm going to learn how to farm. I'm going to learn how to be a rancher. I'm going to find out how to make the money and get us there. That was it. So when she died, I didn't just lose my wife. I lost everything. I lost my dreams, my hopes, my future, my plans. It died with her. Wow. And for a year, 4 months, it hasn't gone anywhere. You go to counseling, you go to therapy, and they're like, well, you need to find a goal. You need to find a dream. I don't have one necessarily. I can't find one right now because it's just gone. That was, from the time I was like 13, I just wanted to be a husband. And maybe because I grew up in a home where my father was loving and kind and caring, and I watched how he loved my mother and how things just went well in the home. And, my entire family, I'm pretty sure, has only had 2 divorces. And one of them was a cousin, and the other one was my brother, but that's because he got on drugs really bad. And so, life left him because he was dragging him down to a hole. But for the most part, parents are happily married, grandparents are happily married. I grew up seeing people who were devoted and dedicated to their wives. And to me, that was like the prime of life, is being with somebody to do a partnership with for life. No matter what came, no matter what hardships, thick or thin, children, no children, that was the goal.
That is beautiful. I am honored that you would share that. And wow, that is a dream. Are you comfortable with sharing about how Brittany passed?
Yeah, that's fine. Um, so she ended up passing from COVID, or from complications from COVID. Right before the year that she passed back in May, we had first, our only really big disagreement. When we were married, we never screamed at each other, slammed doors, silent treatments. That never happened in our home. And it was something I kind of made evident on the first day, was, we're not going to do this. If we have a disagreement, let's have a disagreement. Let's be adults about it. Let's talk, but we're not screaming, degraded, slamming doors, silent treatments. That's just not going to happen in our home. If you're upset, if we're angry, then let's step away for a minute, but we're coming back and we're finishing that discussion that day. I'm not going to, I don't want to be the horror stories where you hear about people that ran off and they screamed and slammed the doors. And, even in an apartment complex, you hear that all around you, people, and I didn't want to be that. I refused. And one of my favorite phrases I have learned to live by was from a wonderful pastor that I follow. And he said, "It takes two to tango, but only one to pursue peace." So if you're both arguing, fighting, willing to argue and fight, it takes two to tango. But if one person, just one of you, is always pursuing peace, there is no fight, because there is no contention. So I made it kind of like my goal to be the one that always pursued peace. Even if I was upset or angry, I wasn't going to let it go too far. And I failed at that one time. And I said something really out of pocket. And I knew as soon as I said it and what I had done was out of pocket, and it hurt her really bad. And I had left to go to the store for something and came back. And when I came back in, she had packed a bag and she walked by me and she said, "I'm leaving for the night. I'm leaving." And I was in tears. I was broken. And because I knew, I understood. And I didn't try to stop her. I didn't argue with her. I said, "Okay, I understand." I said, "There's only one request that I have. If you would honor that for me, text me and let me know you're safe. I don't need to know where you are." She turned the tracker off on her phone. She left me for a night and disappeared. And I said, "Just let me know you're safe." And about 11:30 or so that night, she texted me and said, "I'm safe. I'm secure for the night. You hurt me really bad, and I will talk to you tomorrow." And I understood. I agreed. And we ended up meeting at, the guy who married us was one of our mentors. And so we ended up meeting at his house the next day for a home church session. And then he sat us down for about an hour and a half and talked to us afterwards and told me I was a knucklehead. And I agreed, and told her she was a knucklehead, and she agreed. And it was kind of a thing that needed to be worked out. And it was. And that was, at that moment, our marriage went on this uphill climb. It's like that kind of culminated all of those years of this junk we'd been under, kind of broke at the head right there and fixed it. And then after that, we had this uphill climb. We went on a trip to Medicine Park, Oklahoma in July to go see the otters at the museum. She loved otters, her favorite animal. And when we came back, I want to say about a week later, she started having a lot of back problems. She was in pain and her legs were burning. And it's like, we don't know what happened. I don't know if when we were climbing around on the rocks, if she twisted something. We didn't know, but it was just like it just kept getting worse, to the point that she ended up on a walker and bedbound. Like, she could barely get around the house without the assistance of a walker, and was just bedridden. And she was going to chiropractors and then trying to get in to see a back specialist. We've got to find out what's going on. She can't even go to work. She can't drive. Like, she's struggling, and not in the wrong way. But I love those moments, because those are the moments I got to take care of her. And that's what I loved the most, was just caring for my wife. And so, having to basically wait on her hand and foot didn't matter to me. I was there. Hand and foot. Didn't matter if she called me, woke up in the middle of the night, winced, hurt, pain. I was at her side. Didn't matter. And so she finally got in to see a doctor, or was getting in to see a doctor, but they required an MRI prior. So that way, once we got there, we kind of already knew what was happening. So we went to a here in Oklahoma City. There's a hospital called St. Anthony's, and they have kind of like those little I don't know what you would call them. They're the smaller versions of big hospitals. They call them health plexes or something like that. And they have an MRI set up there. So we went to get this MRI done, and she finished. We were supposed to go back home, and the MRI tech ran out and said, "Hey, wait. There was something wrong on an image. I may need to retake the thing. So can you hang out for a second?" Sure, whatever. About 5 minutes later, the same MRI tech opens the door and waves us into the back. We're thinking, okay, she's going to have to redo the whatever image is wrong. And they were waiting with a wheelchair for her. And I'm like, okay. She goes, there's something on your MRI, and I cannot tell you what it is, but you need to go to the emergency room right now. Okay. Put her in the wheelchair, wheel her to the emergency room. They get her in the bed, get her set up, start an IV. Doctor was in the room in like 5 minutes. That's pretty quick. If you've ever been in an ER, usually the nurse comes in and you're there for a minute, the doctor comes in. He was in there within 5 minutes. And he said, your MRI shows that you have a bulging disc that is pressing on the cluster of nerves in your lower spine. If you move wrong, you could lose your legs. So this is a medical emergency. We are recommending that you go downtown to the main hospital, and we'll set you up for emergency neurosurgery. And they'll take care of the disc and get it where you're not in danger. Okay, big announcement, freaking out here. Absolutely, let's do it. He said you can go home, but it will probably take you 6 months to get in to see somebody. And if something goes wrong, you will lose your legs. And so we both agreed, we got to get this done. I stepped out of the hospital room to make phone calls to family, let them know, hey, this is what's happened. I stepped back into the hospital room, and the doctor walked in and said, if you leave again, you're not allowed back in here. And I said, okay, what's going on? He said, she's COVID positive. What do you mean she's COVID positive? The hell are you talking about? She's been bedridden at home for 3 weeks. Where? She has no symptoms. She's not even sniffling. Test came back positive. Retested her, COVID positive. And at this point, we're, 2021, heat of the pandemic, protocols are in place. If I walk out of the room, I can't come back. And I said, okay, so what are you telling me then? You're telling me whenever you take her downtown, I can't see her again? Yes. So when the ambulance gets here to take her downtown, you will say goodbye and you will not see her again. Okay. And she's freaking out because she's never had a major surgery, and now she's going to have to do it alone, isolated in a room. And we're both pretty upset. She's panicking, she's scared, but eventually the ambulance shows up, put her on the cot, take her away. And I had to watch my wife go away. At this point, just like everybody else, I couldn't go see her. I had to rely on Zoom meetings and phone calls and text messages to kind of keep up to date. Pushing the story ahead, she ends up having this back surgery, still not symptomatic for COVID, but positive. And after the back surgery, they're holding her there for, I think it was a day just to make sure. She was supposed to be outpatient, but I think they ended up holding her for 1 day or something like that. And then the doctor was kind of reluctant to let her go just because she was, COVID and whatnot. And I said, look, you get two options. Either you can bring her down to me, or I will break your protocol and come get her. She's coming home. This is an outpatient surgery. We're done with this. She's got no symptoms. Home. And he finally was like, okay, I get it. She was released. She came. We picked her up. But at this time, I had started feeling bad. I was not doing so great. I was starting to run a small fever. I just kind of was feeling under the weather. I wasn't doing good. And I knew that after that type of a surgery, she was going to need care, and at least until she was up and moving better. And so I asked my parents, hey, can she come live with you guys until I get over the sickness? And then I'll bring her back home and I'll take care of her. And I ended up getting full-blown COVID, 104-degree fever, oxygen in the toilet. And I just refused to go to the hospital. I dealt with it at my house. I fought through it. It was horrible, worst sickness I've ever had in my life. Not a fan. I've had it 3 times, and the first time was the worst. The third time was a pretty close second. But it was awful. And while she was staying at my parents' house, I got constant updates for her and everything. And she kind of had started coughing a little bit and was just kind of nauseated. And so it was like, I don't know if that's from surgery meds or if she's starting to feel COVID symptoms. And on a Sunday, I got a call from my mom, and she said, "I'm sorry, but they had to take her. I was in the hospital." Why? Um, well, she was acting really funny and talking with, her speech was a little slurred. She was panting. So I, sent your dad to get a pulse ox from Walgreens, and we came back and put it on her finger, and her oxygen count was at 35%. Overnight, like drastic change, and called 911, and they're kind of even going, that's probably not accurate, because if it's at 35, she's not going to be talking or awake or alert. And they send an ambulance out, they hooked her up to their machine, 35%, and she was still functioning and talking, but it was just kind of, and they're like going, okay, wow. So they're hooking her up on oxygen, they get her to the hospital again, where she still is technically within us, the 14-day of COVID. So she's now still, again, isolated from me. I can't get there to her. I can't be there. And they held her in the ER for a while. And then they finally came back and said that she had bilateral pneumonia, in both lungs. And she was going to be admitted, and she was going to have to stay until it was over. Okay. Admitted her to the hospital. She was there 6 days. 6 days, and then they finally let her have visitors, because since she had tested positive for COVID at St. Anthony's 14 days prior, at the start of this, before she had surgery. So she had that week, and then she was in the hospital for 5 or 6 days. And then at that point, they said, "You've made your 14-day period. You can have visitors." I was ecstatic. I was like, heck yeah. Like I was there within an hour as soon as she alerted me that she could have visitors. She seemed to be doing okay. They had her on a nasal cannula, high oxygen flow, and I mean her oxygen was up there. It was in the high 80s, almost 90s. So I mean she was doing okay and talking to me. And I visited that day, and then I left at like 8:30 that evening, and got a call at 9 from her telling me they were moving her to the ICU. Why? I was just there. You're fine. She said, "I don't know. The doctor came in and said you're being moved to the ICU for observation," and walked out. And that was the last thing I heard. I don't even know what's going on. So I am now calling nurses, and I'm like, "You get this doctor to call me now, and you tell me why my wife is being moved. What is going on?" I was just there. She seemed fine. Doctor already left for the day. It was kind of like I announced it, and he went home. He was done for the day, whatever. I couldn't get any answers till the next morning. So next morning, bright and early, I'm at the hospital in the ICU with her. You can tell me what's going on. And he, pulled me out of the room and said, "Your wife has developed ARDS. ARDS is acute respiratory distress syndrome, also known as wet lung. It's fatal most of the time because there's no treatment for it. Basically, your lungs drown yourself is what's happening. The air sacs in your lungs fill with fluid to the point you just can't oxygenate your body," which is what most people that had COVID get, because they develop ARDS. And so he said, while she is okay now, he said there is a strong chance that she will have to be intubated. And if she's on a normal floor, it will take me much longer to intubate her because I have to bring her here first. So we brought her here early for observation in case worst case scenario. Okay. I didn't tell her she had ARDS. I told her that, they're observation because of lung problems. They're just making sure. 3 days later, she was intubated. And I missed it. I had to go for a cardiologist appointment. I had an incident a month or so before that, before we got all this started happening, where I had they thought it was a heart attack, and it wasn't. And so they set me up with a cardiologist to figure out what was going on. And I had this appointment today, and I needed to go set up the initial appointment. And she was having a pretty crappy day. They had her on BiPAP and oxygen, and she was on her stomach and just not doing so great. But, I didn't necessarily think. Anyways, Went to the doctor's office, and as I was leaving, my phone rang, and it was her. Well, she can't talk on a phone because face stuff. And I'm like going, what is going on? And I pick up the phone, and it's her nurse. And she says, I've got to intubate her. I'm sorry. She's sitting at 70% and getting lower. I don't have a choice. I was like, I am in Midwest City. I am 15 minutes out. Can you wait? She goes, I will wait as long as I can. And I am flying 100 miles an hour, hazards on the road, traffic. I'm delayed. I pull in to this hospital. I run up to the next floor. I round the corner, and as soon as I hit my wife's room, they're shoving a tube down her throat. I didn't make it while she was conscious. Never heard her voice again after that. She, her uncle and her aunt were there, and they were there when they put her under. But the last thing I got to talk to her on the phone when the nurse called me, and I told her that I loved her and they were doing what was best for her, and I will be right back as soon as I can. And the nurse said that she said, I love you too. But I never got to hear her voice. So I showed up, see them doing this, and it's not a pretty sight. You don't want to see it if it's happening, because they have to paralyze you completely and put you under, and so you are pale as you look like a corpse. I mean, you're just laying there and you're out. So to me, it looked like I was staring at a dead body. And I've worked for mortuary before, so I know what a dead body looks like. And so I see this, and I snapped in the middle of the hallway. I was trying to get in the room. I was like, that's my wife, and they're trying to keep me out. And her uncle ended up having to grab me and take me away. And I was sobbing and spawning, because all the horror stories you hear about COVID is once they're ventilated, they don't come off. And so I'm trying to maintain faith, and at the same time, my composure. Doctors end up coming out and talking to us and letting us know how serious the situation is and how bad off she is. And one of the things that happened at this moment is, the nurse came out that was taking care of her and handed me her wedding ring, her cell phone. And I have since then on TikTok talked to the nurses, put videos out, and I said, listen, if you have to take the wedding ring off somebody's hand, let them do it. Offer for the husband to do it, because I put it on her hand as a promise. It was not your position to take it off. If it needs to come off, I understand that, but let me pull it off. And I've had a lot of nurses get positive response to that, saying, if from here on out, if they have the ability to, they will ask the spouse to remove the ring. Which again, you put it on my hand, I put it on yours. Don't take a ring off. Because at this point, I'm already afraid she's dying, and now you're handing me her wedding ring. She was in that hospital with COVID for 40 days and 40 nights. I got a call from the nurse that was watching her the night she passed away, and said she's not doing good. Her oxygen's in the 50s, and it's not coming back up. She's not going to make it. And the protocol for the hospital is at nighttime, only one person is allowed in the room. And you have to be in before 7 o'clock because they lock the doors. So it's kind of like here it is, I don't know, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, getting this phone call. And I'm like, okay, well, can I come now then if she's not going to, will they let me in? She said, yes, you just informed the desk that we've called you and told you that your wife is passing and you need to come in, and they'll call us and confirm it. We'll let you in. And I said, I know it's against protocol, but can I have my mother with me, because I don't want to be alone. They allowed it. So I come get to her room, and when they gave me her wedding ring, I had this really cute idea. I took the ring back to the jeweler, and I had it restored to its original look. All the dents and stuff taken off. I had them clean it, restore it. Because what I was going to do is whenever she, woke up and they were going to take her to rehab, she was getting better. She had this moment where she was getting better, and then she got pneumonia again a second time, and she couldn't fight through it. So we were supposed to go to rehab, and then all of a sudden she tanked and she never came back. So I had this ring all clean. And what I was going to do is whenever she, was awake and alert enough to be able to understand me, I was going to repropose while she was in the hospital room, just still saying that even in all of this, I'm still your husband. I still want you to be my wife. Will you, and I was going to drop the knee and ask you, Brittany, will you marry me again? and just be cute about it, right? And so I pulled her ring out of my safe and I took it with me. And I put it back on her hand. Because if she was going to die, she was going to die married to me. And I was there most of the evening and waiting, watching her oxygen and stuff fluctuate, watching the numbers do what they're doing. And was trying to decide, is this the moment we need to move to comfort care, which is where you turn the machine off and let them die. And I'm waiting and trying to figure this out. And then the x-ray tech comes in to take the morning x-ray of her lungs to see, what are we looking at. And I watched him do it, and I watched the picture show up on the screen. And they were worse than they were day one. I knew she wasn't coming back. X-ray tech left the room. I called the nurse in and I said, we're moving to comfort care today, right now. And so, she said, well, I'll have to call the doctor because he doesn't usually come in until 8 o'clock or so. And I looked up and I said, well, you won't have to call him you won't have to go very far. He's standing at the desk. The doctor even came in early because he heard she was, so he came in early. And she goes out and talks with him, and he comes in holding the yellow DNR slip. And he says, I'm gonna need you to sign this. And he had discussed it with us earlier that day that, when she was kind of wishy-washy, he said, we've come to the point where there's really not a whole lot else we can do to help her. She's either going to survive it on her own or she's not. And he said, and either you're going to sign a DNR or I will medically deem it necessary. And that was one of the last conversations I had. So when he came back in, he was a very nice man. He was empathetic. He wasn't, cold or anything like that. He came in and, my mother was kind of in the room just observing all this. And she said, you could tell that he didn't want to hand you that paper. Because even he was holding on hope. She was 30. So he hands me this paper and I just grab the pen and get ready to start signing it. He says, you can take a minute, sit. And I said, if I don't, I won't. So I had to officially sign my wife's life away, stating that when her heart stops, they won't bring her back. And I said, let's just go ahead and do it now. And he starts talking about how, well, we need to call the family and all this other stuff. And I said, she didn't want her family here to begin with. She's not wanted any visitors. It was not part of the plan. And I've not been able to stop it. And I think it just needs to be done. And he said, well, I will tell you that most of the time death brings family closer together. And so I think we need to wait for the family. I relented, made a phone call to her aunt and uncle who were supposed to be leaving to go on a trip. I said, don't leave. She's not going to make it. I said, will you tell her family? And then I started calling mine. The plan was to have everybody in the room at I think 7 or 8 in the morning is what we set the time for. And it was about 5:30 now, 5:35. And as soon as the doctor left the room, I turned into a mess. I was a hysterical, broken mess. And I didn't care who heard me. I didn't care what was happening in the other rooms. I cried so hard, I was making myself sick, vomiting, because I'm losing everything. Like I said, it wasn't just her. I was losing everything. A lot of people will say things like, that's my wife. She's the most important thing to me. That was my entire world laying in that bed. And I went to the point that I had to sit in a little recliner and put a cold rag on my head, lean back, because I was probably going to pass out if I didn't stop. And what they do when they do comfort care, if you've never been in that situation, is they have to take the paralytic off so that you start to try to breathe on your own. That way, when they cut the machine off, it's not like you're just paralyzed and you die. It's supposed to be a natural death. Your body is just going to give out on its own. And, we set the time for 7 or 8 because it was supposed to take 2 hours for the paralytic to get out of her system. They turn the paralytic off. I'm having this crying conniption fit. And then I noticed that her oxygen is changing on its own. And the ventilator is showing signs that she's trying to fight it. So in other words, the paralytic is already gone. She'd been on it for so long. I think that it was kind of like she was building a tolerance anyways. So when they killed it, it left pretty fast. We're talking 15 minutes. And I don't know medically what you want to call it. She's out cold. She's under, a lot of, I've had people tell me both ways that they can hear, they can't hear, they're not aware, they are aware. But I'm almost 100% sure she could hear me crying. She was fighting so hard. You could see it. You could see the way her back was rising. She was fighting to breathe. And there was something that came over me in that moment. It was like peace. I was almost like my emotions shut off entirely. And I was just this calm, collected person. And I stood up and I walked around and I grabbed her by her hand. She was laying face down. And so they kind of had her, they looked like swimmers that looked this. And so I grabbed her hand. I started reminding her of how she got her nickname, recounting that first kiss and sorry. She telling her that I was proud of her, that she was the strongest woman I've ever known, that she fought for 40 days and 40 nights. And if she was ready to go home and be with Jesus, that was her choice. I said, but in order for you to walk out, you need a miracle. And that's between you and him. I can't do anything. Told her how much I loved her, talked with her, and then I started singing over her favorite worship song. And I watched her oxygen drop from 50% to 8% with the machine still breathing and all the medicine still in her. It's like she was stopping everything herself. She's ready to go. Watched her heart rate fall to 25%. Again, every machine, all the medicine still running. She was going of her own accord. And I've never wanted to hit medical staff so hard in my life than when that nurse walked in with adrenaline to hang because they wanted to keep her heart going till the family got there so that everybody could be there when she passed. And I honestly wanted to punch the nurse in the face. I still remember the rage that I felt when I saw them come in with that bag because I asked. The green bag was the paralytic. It was always because it's got to be out of light. And she said, oh no, this is adrenaline. It's to keep her heart going. And I was like looking up and heart rate's at 25, her oxygen's at like 8. I'm like, I said, don't you dare. She's ready to go. She's leaving. I was staying over her a little longer and it just kept staying in the same area. And so finally I opened the door. I stepped out to the doctor and I said, man, she's at 25% or 25 heart rate and barely any oxygen. I said, can we just kill the machines and get this and be done? And he just looked at me and he goes, you have a lovely singing voice. It won't be long. Just go sing. So I went back in, and I think the last thing I sang was Amazing Grace or something like that. Just a generic. And I had my head pressed against her back so I could hear her heart. And I listened to it stop. And then the monitor started screeching, and the nurse walked in and put the, stethoscope and pronounced that she had died. Turned the machines off. When I listened to her heart stop, so did mine. In the same instant hers stopped, so did mine. All the emotions died, everything, it just was gone. And I stayed in that hospital room with her for another hour or so. There's some people that showed up to say goodbye. And I thought that I was okay to leave until it came time to leave. Because I was cold and I was calm, and I picked up my bag to leave and shattered like glass. Because I knew that as soon as I left that room, I would never kiss anyone ever again. I would never remarry. My entire world is ending, and I'm about to leave the one thing that I care about. And I put my bag back down and I picked her up and I kissed her face. I kissed her on the lips. I held her body close. I cried some more. And then I finally gritted my teeth as hard as I could clench and picked up my bag and walked. And every step was a deterrent. Leaving behind everything I cared about. I I put my heart in her hands, and she took it with her to her grave. We set up the funeral. It was the day after Thanksgiving was her funeral. And I spoke at her service. I was the very first person that spoke outside of the minister. Everybody hated me at that point, blamed me for her death, blamed me for COVID, blamed me for everything, and blamed me for keeping family and friends away because that's what she wanted. I was the bad guy. And that's fine. I didn't care. And that's why I chose to speak first. If I'm already going to be the bad guy, then I will recount to you how she died. And so at her funeral, I spoke first and retold the same story you just heard because they didn't make it. So they heard exactly how she passed away. And in fact, that video is on my TikTok page. You can find it. I posted that at the kind of the end of what I was talking about. And then kind of untraditionally, I was her pallbearer. I carried her casket with a team, obviously, but I was on the pallbearer team. I carried her out of the sanctuary. I carried her to her graveside, and I was the last person to touch her casket before it went down to the ground. And I promised her that I would be with her the entire way of her life, and so I walked her all the way. I didn't let somebody else do it. I wasn't gonna pass it on and make it somebody else's responsibility. I carried her, and I made sure that when I was carrying her casket, I was holding her head. I was wherever her head was in the casket, that's where I was. And I was, like I said, was the last person to touch her casket and watched it go all the way down. And when it hit the ground, it clanged against that concrete vault, and they pulled the straps off. I picked up a rose and I dropped it and walked away. And it was kind of like, my duty is your husband. I finished. I completed my task, I guess, if you will. And I went back to the church and had dinner and all the other stuff that they have after funerals for people. And then after that is when the TikTok started, because I came to this point of realization that as a male widow, there is almost no support for us anywhere. You search widow groups, it's all female. You read the Bible, it's all female. It's all about the women widows. It never mentions guys. All the widows on TikTok are mostly female. I see very few guys. There's some out there. I'm not discounting that at all. In fact, there's some really good ones out there. But by and large, it's mostly the women that I see. And so as a 29-year-old at this point, I felt alone. I'm like, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? Not even the Bible that I believe in has anything for male widows. It's all female. What am I gonna do? I'm isolated, I'm alone, and I can't be the only one. That was my thought. I cannot be the only male out there that doesn't want to go hang out in a group of widowed women because I just don't fit in and my emotions don't run the same and I'm not dealing with the same stuff that they're dealing with. And so, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make TikTok and I'm just going to recount my story and I'm going to help those that I can and just discuss life as being a widowed person, especially at 29. Because I figured one day I may be widowed, but I was expecting 60s, 70s, late life, after some kids, after some things to keep me going. I speak with so many widows, and a lot of them talk about, well, I keep living for my kids. Yeah, that's a blessing to you because I have nothing to live for. I don't have anything of her left. I have nothing here that I want. There's not a thing in this life that matters to me anymore. It's gone. It died with her. And so I don't have anything to live for like they do. I don't have the kids, the grandkids, even my godfather who lost his wife just a month prior to Brittany has his whole family. He's got grandkids and great grandkids now. It's things I don't have that. So I was like, okay, well, let's make this account. And so I just started recounting the story and pretty much just making candid videos on the struggles of day-to-day widowhood, what it's like to wake up at 2 a.m. screaming, crying your eyes out because your world is gone. And there's no comfort anywhere. And like I said at the beginning, I don't keep skeletons in my closet, so I don't keep a secret. I just kind of air it all out and let it be out there. So I figured, you know what, I will just let people see it raw as can be, and I won't hide anything.
I won't struggle to try to say what is the right thing. And I know I am sorry doesn't hold a lot, but it is what is in my heart for the struggle that you are experiencing and what this is. Have people reached out to you, other widowers, on TikTok to share and connect?
Yes, I have made quite a few friends of other widows, mostly widows. I really don't have any male widowers that have reached
Widowers.
out to me necessarily. I've had a couple of messages here and there, but most of the friends that I've made have been, female widows, and I think that a lot of that comes from that I'm a safe space because I'm not interested in remarrying at all. And so, they don't have to worry about me trying to slide into the DMs or, make a move, or I have no interest in that. And so I'm safe. And a lot of them that have messaged me, in fact, one of them actually texts my phone on occasion. She's been widowed 4 years, and she said, I'm one of the only people that have ever made her not feel alone because I'm candid and I talk about things, but at the same time, I'm also safe. I don't have to worry. She doesn't have to worry about me trying to get with her or flirt or any of that stuff. Like, I don't have that in me. And so I have had others reach out. I even had a pastor ask me to come out and do a very similar interview to this at his church because he was starting um a series on grief and loss, because he said, as a pastor in 20 years, I don't hear many sermons on grief ever, if I've even heard one. And so he says, I feel like that's a disservice. And after meeting you and just experiencing what you go through, that, hearing all the things that people shouldn't say and what really bothers you and how I've said a bunch of those things, I figured that maybe we need to talk about it. Maybe we need to have a sermon, or maybe we need to have a class session. And so he's doing it on Wednesday nights for several weeks, just going through the grief process and all this other stuff.
You make a good point. What are some of those things that people shouldn't say?
Anything that begins with the phrase "your wife would want," anything that begins with that phrase. As soon as you say "your wife would want" or "Brittany would want you," anything you say after that is garbage. It's hot garbage. One, because you don't know her that well, especially if you're a random person on the street. Um, but even some of her friends and family, you weren't married to her, and a lot of those things that you say of "she would want" is not conversations that we've had, or they were conversations that we had that didn't go the way you think they would. So, anytime somebody says your wife would want you to move on and find somebody else to be happy, don't think she would, because she had ample opportunity to tell me that. Because I discussed it with her before. It wasn't something, we never had the conversation of what happens when I die. I told her for our entire marriage that if anything ever happens to you, you're it. I waited 26 years of my life for you. I have been with nobody else but you, and I will be with nobody else but you until I take my last breath. You're it. I will not replace you. And in any of those discussions, never once did she say, I wouldn't want that for you. Never once did she say, I don't like that idea, or that seems wrong. She would just smile and accept it and agree. So if she really wanted me to find somebody else, she would have made that known. She would have said, no, that's dumb, or I wouldn't want that for you, or something like that. And she was nice enough to do so, but she never did. So any of those phrases that start with your wife would want, that's garbage. Don't do that. If you want to give advice, because that's what you're doing, you are giving advice, but you're clouding it as it's my wife giving me advice. Don't do that. Just give the advice. I honestly think you would be happier to move on. Thank you for that advice. Not going to happen. That's a better way to do it. Don't, cloud it or shroud it in your wife would want this for you. Just don't do that. Telling people to remarry, don't do that either. If they choose to remarry, which is well within their right, if that's what they want to do, then that's their choice to make. But you telling somebody, especially young people like me, I'm 31, I hate with a passion when somebody says you're young, you'll remarry. My age doesn't mean jack squat. I am just as much of a widow as somebody who is 65. I'm in just as much amount of pain, and you are not telling the 65-year-old grandma, oh, it's okay, you're old, you'll remarry. Don't do that to me. Don't tell me, oh, you're just a baby. Oh, you're young. You'll remarry. And that is a statement I've heard across the board from many of the widows that follow me, is that people telling them to remarry. Because I know several of them that follow me specifically because we have chosen not to remarry. And they're dealing with the same stuff. The one that's been widowed for 4 years that texts me has done the same thing. She's chosen not to remarry. There's no threat from either of us. That's why we're friends. It's kind of one of those things. God has a plan. God needed them more than you did. There's another angel in heaven watching over you now.
Well, I'm sorry. Both of the God needed them more than you. Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Mm-mm. Yes.
Everything happens for a reason. Um, it's better this way. At least you can find love again. And that's just the widowhood part of it. But even for like, what if you lost a child? At least you can have another kid. At least they're not going to have to deal with the world like it is now. I mean, there's just so many things that people spit out of their mouth, and it's like, did you take longer than a second to really process what you were about to throw into the world right there? Because if you did, and I said the same thing about your living child, how would you feel? If I said the same thing about your living spouse, how would you feel? How would you feel if you came up to me and you were having a disagreement, and your spouse and you were separated and you were living apart, and I said, oh, at least you can remarry. Well, I love my spouse. I don't want to be apart from them. So do I. It's the same principle with me. I still love my wife. And it would be a disservice for me to be with anybody else, because they would not receive the love that my wife did at all. They would receive a fraction, if not less than that, of what she did, because my heart belongs to her. So it really just think about things like that. The best thing that somebody can do when it comes to talking with a widow and being helpful is to let yourself be known that you're wanting to help, but don't give unsolicited advice. Don't do it. It doesn't help. Be honoring to your word. If you say, I will be there for you, be there for them. Because I don't know about you, when you lost your husband, when I lost my wife, I got promised by hundreds of people that they would be there for me, that they would check in on me, and they all disappeared in like a month at max. They say that nonchalantly. It's like, oh, we're here for you. And you just call us anytime, and then they don't answer their phone, or they aren't there. So if you're going to tell somebody that, be there for them. Don't be that person that promises and then leaves. And that we're talking church family, church people that I grew up with my entire life. Don't bother to check on me. My phone doesn't ring. It's been a year and 4 months. The only people that check on me on a daily basis are the widows that follow me on TikTok and my parents. That's it.
Do you think people grow tired? They don't know how to deal with it? Why do you think they tap out?
I'll probably a lot of times is, when you're in the throes of grief, you are not exactly the most positive person on the planet. I
That's
can walk
fair.
into a room full of happy people and drag you all to the ground just by being in the room, because my eyes are dead. I'm slow to speak. I'm not laughing and giggling like everybody else. I'm just kind of here. And at the same time, when you start listing all of these things that people shouldn't say, people just stop talking, because they just feel like everything they say is going to be wrong, which is not true, but it is if you're making points that you don't need to. And I think that's, again, nobody's educated on grief, especially in the Western world. The way that we view grief is just atrocious over here in the West. If you go look at like other cultures and how they honor the dead and celebrate them, and we don't do that here. When somebody gets thrown in the ground, it's like, that's it. They're trashed. They're in the ground. They're done. Move on. Forget about them. Stop going to the graveside. Stop carrying their ashes. Stop doing this. It's past tense. They're done. You're alive. They're not. They don't matter anymore. That's how we view it over here. And those are actually phrases that I have heard. You need to move on. She's gone. She doesn't exist anymore. She's dead. She can't feel your love. She doesn't know you love her. She doesn't have thought. She doesn't have feeling. Move on. Find somebody else. Leave the grave. She doesn't know you're bringing her flowers. Like, that's how we view it over here.
Those are strong words, Addison. And wow, I am speechless. But the things you say are true. Those are comments I have heard from other widows and widowers. Those same sentiments in the way we view things, which is actually part of why I am doing this podcast, because it's not fair. It's not right. And we can do better. Being able to share so candidly our experiences, my desire, my prayer is to help other people to, one, know they are not alone, that there are people on this journey with them. And it's okay for them to feel like when people say stuff like that, that it's wrong, that's not appropriate. And for anyone listening to say, I will never say words like that again, that I can just and show up when you say you're going to show up. We're already at the most desperate, most critical, most gut wrenching part of our life. We don't need people to make fake promises and not be there when they say we're there. We're looking for a lifeline. And you don't get death cooties by hanging around someone who lost a loved one and your life is now going to be on the edge. Those words you say are true, and we can do better. And educating, this is a forum for doing that, to share this message for people to know what it looks like to be on this side of someone you love not being here. Like you said, whether it's a child, a grandmother, a spouse, that those lives matter forever. They do. They really do. Has sharing on TikTok help you at all in your grief and being able to constantly speak about Brittany and be in a safe space to share and do that?
Some, I think maybe, but again, it kind of goes back to I didn't do it for me. I do it for the other people, and so it's kind of
Correct.
like I don't pay attention to whether it helps me or not. I don't honestly, you know, I don't remember or not whether you're a Christian or not or Bible believer, but I know that um, the story of
So let me tell
Joseph.
you, I am a Christian. I am
Okay.
an ordained reverend.
Okay.
Um, but my purpose in this, so when I think of something like the massacres that Christians have done and different things, and I know that my intent is to love people right where they're at, because unfortunately, I feel like Christians so much have a voice of what we don't like and how we're telling people and how we're judging people. But I don't see enough people loving people and letting them get a relationship with God. And that relationship with God be the catalyst to want to be able to change a life, to live with God and understand how much they mean to Him, that they were created with a purpose. So that's not what I lead with. Obviously, it's a conversation that I welcome, but it is the whole foundation of who I am as a person. So that just want to be clear, but it is, but my methodology and how I'm managing that, because I've noticed that when I don't lead with that, people tend to talk, they tend to engage, and then they go, I want to show them what somebody that loves God looks like differently than what media may produce or throw out in people. That God is loving and He's seeing your pain and He has not left you in this circumstance. We as people, we're trash. God is better than us and has more to offer.
So then, if you're familiar with the story of Joseph and the coat of many colors, that's
Yep.
just a common. People know that story, right? At the when Jacob finds out that his son has been killed, right? He doesn't know he's still alive. He makes a statement when his friends and his family attempt to comfort him. He says, "I refuse to be comforted. I will mourn my son until I join him in the grave." And that's kind of where that ends. And then we find out, obviously, later on that he's alive and he's been in Egypt the whole time. But that is what Jacob states. And that is the very same stance that I took. I don't need comfort. I'm content in my pain, and I will suffer and mourn her until I am with her again, because nothing else matters to me. Nothing else matters to me. I put a DNR on myself. I have an advance directive that you cannot save my life. You cannot intubate me. You cannot give me food. You cannot do anything. If I am mortally injured, you get to stand there and watch. And that's exactly what I want. I have a bracelet on that has, the DNR on it. I've got it in my backpack that I carry with me. It's hanging on my wall when you walk in the door of my house. Everybody that is around me has a copy of it. It is well known that you don't touch me. So when I think about, has it helped me, it helps me when I talk about her. It allows me to smile. And people will say that, in my videos in the comments, is you glow
Yeah.
when you talk about Brittany. And that even if you go back and if you're watching this podcast on YouTube and you can see the video linked on it, when you're asking me about our relationship and how it started, I probably am glowing and sparkling, and it's the brightest part of my day. And that is the only thing that brings that out. I used to be like that all the time. I used to have this sparkle in my eyes, this life, this light, this glow about me, this Jesus complex, if you will. It's just I just had that love and natural light for everybody. Even when she died and it died with her, I don't even look in mirrors anymore because my eyes are hollow and they're cold, and it's like being lifeless. It's like the way I describe it is as if death itself ripped my heart out of my chest and left me an immortal corpse, like an immortal husk. Like I walk through life, I'm alive, but I'm not. And it's like, it's not a choice. I'm not like, oh, today I'm going to suffer. It literally is just being that broken that I can't. And I love to tell people about Brittany. I will talk about her until I'm blue in the face. But when you start asking me about me, I will shut down very quickly. It's like doesn't matter. You don't need to know about me. Don't worry about me. You want to talk about her and her memory and her legacy, then sure. And that's kind of what the TikTok channel has even become, is it's become not only this place for people to see what grief is like, but it's become her legacy. It's all of these people now that know her that would
Yes.
not have otherwise. And I've had a couple people make comments that are like, well, she's going to be really surprised when a whole bunch of people start showing up in heaven and know her by name. And it's going to be, and I'm like, yeah, and she's going to either kill me when I get there. She's going to prove that people can indeed die after they get to heaven when she beats me, or she's going to be flattered that her husband wouldn't shut his mouth and stop talking about who she was and how amazing she is. And, that she's my world. I take care of her headstone like I took care of her. If it rains, I'm out there the very next day to scrub it clean, make sure there's no dirt on it, no spots. I keep flowers out there. If they, I rotate them out every couple of months. If it switches to wintertime, I put a grave blanket down. I take care of her stone as if it was her personally, because it's all I have left. I have memories, I have pictures, but that is the last physical place that I had her. So I think the TikTok has helped a lot more people than it has helped me. And I do get random messages from people I had one from a lady yesterday that talked about, she commented, I don't know, a couple weeks ago about me wearing my wife's ring. And if I was concerned about losing it, what if it broke? What if it came off? And I explained that the chain that I wear is short and it's thick, so it's not likely to be caught on anything. I don't ever take the ring off. I sleep with it on. The only time it comes off my neck is when I shower and it goes into a solution to be clean. And then I inspect the ring and the chain for damages to make sure it's not wearing or tearing. And then it goes right back on my neck. And because I told her that, she sent me a message and said, thank you so much. You gave me the courage to wear my mother's wedding band. I've had it in a safe this whole time, but because of what you said, I feel comfortable enough to wear it and get out of the house wearing it and doing the short chain. So things like that, when I see those things, I feel good. I feel relieved. It's like, I'm so glad that you found a way to do that, and a way to be comforted. And I've had lots of people say things like, I didn't know that I wasn't alone. I didn't know that other people felt specifically like I did, that didn't want to remarry, that still love their spouse, that still, that's just not something we see. You see so many widows that are remarried, moved on, and it's like there's a small collective of us that don't want to. And so it's kind of refreshing for them to see somebody like that. And one as young as I am too. It's kind of like you're 31 and you've made that decision. Yeah. And it hadn't changed. Give it a year. I did. It didn't change.
I think it's great to be able to have that community that honor. And if I may share, I know the wedding band thing was one of the most difficult things for me to deal with. The job that I had was very public, and people would see you have a wedding band and then they would just start a conversation. If I may share, this is actually my wedding band and my late husband's wedding band that I made and had a jeweler make into a heart. And it's a double heart pendant. The inside is my wedding band. I don't know if you can see it. And then the one inside on the outside is his wedding band.
Okay.
And that was really neat to be able to wear. Sometimes I may tell someone the story of what it is, And to someone else, it may just look like a piece of jewelry because I did not know what to do with those. So it does drive you to trying to repurpose things. I'll ask one more question, and I know we have talked for a long time, but you definitely do light up talking about Brittany. I mean, sharing about her is, you can see it's exhilarating for you. When you hear people say the word move on, what do you think they're trying to say versus what's really being interpreted?
So at the beginning, when I heard the phrase "move on," like close to her death, my very first thought is, "You want me to find somebody else?" That's kind of that was the initial thought at the beginning. Now, as time has moved on, when people say "move on," I interpret it as moving on in life. Not staying stuck where you are, and that is hard for me because of where, like I told you, my dream and my goal was marriage. And so seeing a future outside of that, moving on with my life, is not something that I have a vision for. I can't see past this one. Other people, they start volunteering, doing other stuff, becoming more active in things, or continuing on the dreams that they had. And so when I hear "move on," I have to stop the initial reaction of "they want you to remarry," because it's just something I heard so blasted much right after she died was "I'm young, remarry, I'm young, remarry, I'm young, remarry." So anytime somebody said "move on," that's the very first thing my brain does is I'm like, no, I'm not remarrying. Stop asking. But now, after time, and it really depends on the person that's asking. You can sense intent when somebody's talking to you, body language, tone of voice, word choice, eyes. You can read somebody like a book. It is not hard to do, and whether the intent is nefarious or not. And you can kind of tell by the way they look before they start talking if they're going to be approaching what I like to call the uncomfortable subject of marrying again, because I'm so hostile about it that it's uncomfortable for people to ask me, or if they're saying, "I don't like seeing you like this. You should find some happiness again." That's kind of the move on. And you'll see a lot of people, a lot of the widow community don't like the term "move on." They like "move forward," because moving on implies leaving something behind. Moving forward implies taking it with you. So again, it's a word choice. That's kind of what people say. Choose your words carefully. Move on means leave your spouse in the ground and move on. Moving forward means take what you have, the love you have with them, and carry them for the rest of your days. That's an easier way to interpret that. So that's the answer to your question. But I think it really is, it's the intent of the person that's saying it, but also it's that word choice. Don't use "move on," use "move forward."
Thank you. One of the things you mentioned about that you did a conversation like this at a church. If someone wanted to reach out, would you be interested in having an opportunity to talk about Brittany at other opportunities?
Sure.
Or,
Yeah, no. They can
okay,
reach me at my TikTok, Beyond Starlight 2021, or they can find me on Facebook, Addison Drake, and message me there. I'm open to most things. It really depends on the venue and why you want the conversation spoken. I am I love to talk about Brittany in all aspects. I love to talk about my wife and how amazing she is, and she still will always be for me. But at the same time, it depends on what you're going to use it for. TikTok is a public platform, but I don't allow people to download my videos. They can't save them. They can only share them, duet them, stitch them, but they cannot save them to their phone.
okay,
Because I don't know what they're going to use them for, and I don't really want, like, in this day and age, people can edit a video to say what they want to. They can cut out things that I say, or they can focus on a specific part. And so I'm always curious to know, if you're going to reach out to me, I would love to do that. But I'm going to be very upfront. Why? What is your purpose behind it? Are you just wanting my story? Are you doing a sermon series on it? Are you just, why are you having me here today?
okay.
Just that's also protecting her legacy too.
Yes,
It's tied to her name, and whether she's physically alive or not, her name follows me. It's kind of the whole purpose of this thing that we're doing now, is she is very much a part of this thing as I am. And so
yes,
I'm not only keeping myself as protected as I can, but I want to keep her name honored as well.
indeed. And Addison will share that information. And when the blog for the podcast is posted in the YouTube description, it will be listed there to be able to connect with him. Addison, thank you for bringing your love story, you and Brittany, to this platform. Thank you so much for your candor for other people to know that they are not alone. As we wrap up, anything else you want to talk about that we didn't discuss or feel like you want to mention?
No, ma'am, I think that's it.
All right, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I really have almost no words but gratefulness. I am sorry for Addison's journey. I am sorry for Brittany no longer being on this side of eternity. But I am grateful for Addison being so willing to be so candid and to share every gut wrenching part of his journey since Brittany stopped breathing. And if I haven't said it before, I want you to know I am so sorry for the person that you have lost. I am so sorry for what has driven you to this conversation. But I am glad that you have found the widowhood. And I want you to know that we are on this journey with you and to be encouraged. And you are welcome to email me, to reach out, to share your journey, to make your voice heard. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.